Mahalo au pito, Professor Kaili. Mahalo anui loa to Professor Kali Fermantes and to everyone for the warm welcome. Ko pasen rapa ne Janice te tataro, au ne oa te maie, au te pātere. Bulavinaka, Talofa Lava, Malo Elele, Yokwe, who else is in the house? Kia ora koutou. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's been, gosh, over, I think, 25 years since I visited this campus last. I came here last when I was a graduate student at the University of Hawaii, and I had a cousin who was studying here, Willie Kwan Singh, and he invited me up and took me around PCC and showed me a bit of the university campus. And since then, I haven't had the opportunity to visit again. So it was really a great privilege to be invited by Professor Philip MacArthur and the administration here, others to come and participate in the review of Pacific Studies, Pacific Island Studies. And then on top of it, to give this talk, to share a little bit about what we do in Pacific Studies. We call it Pacific Studies at Victoria University of Wellington. So, as usual, I have more to share than I probably have time for. So let's get on to it. I want to talk about making akamai, and I want to talk about how we imagine and make Pacific Studies at Victoria University. And I hope it will spark for you some ideas about how you all imagine Pacific Island Studies here and how you all can make Pacific Island Studies together. Because that's one of the key things for us at Victoria University. Pacific Studies for us is not something that the professors or academics imagine and make alone. It's got to be something that the students imagine and make, and the community imagines and makes, and the university imagines and makes together. So, I'm going to ask you to do something interactive to start with. And I'm going to ask you to turn to the people next to you and just chat quickly about what you think Pacific Island Studies is, or what Pacific Studies is. All right. I know you could chat forever. I know some of you aren't even talking about the question, but let's hear what some of your ideas are. I'm going to pop them up, on the PowerPoint. So, anyone want to share? And if you're taking the course or teaching the course, you're welcome to throw ideas in as well. If you've never taken a course, what does it look like to you? What do you think it is? Anyone? Yes. Aloha.
Learning and understanding Oceania.
Okay, thank you. Learning and understanding Oceania. And Oceania is another term for this region, right? The Pacific. You have an idea? Yes?
Yeah, it's like we study the Pacific Islands and the cultures.
Yep. Good. Thank you. Yes?
History and interactions of the people.
Histories and interactions of the people?
The people with each other in their own cultures and with the forces of other islands.
And others. Okay, is that you, Kayla?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else? Oh, I couldn't see. Yes. Oh, yes, Mitchell.
Comparing traditional with contemporary.
Yeah. Okay. With the, let's say, comparing the traditional with the contemporary, yeah? In the Pacific. Very good, those are great. Thank you. There might be a few more that aren't covered in what we've got here, but this is a great start. And one of the things we've struggled with, Pacific Studies at Victoria University, as you'll find out, is only 14 years old. Although it does have a longer history, prehistory, I guess. But we struggle to explain and define Pacific Studies to others throughout our short life. And one of the definitions we've come up with, we've tried to kind of really condense it so people kind of get it and think that it's important at the same time, is our definition goes, Pacific Studies is an international, interdisciplinary, cross-cultural field of study. An international, interdisciplinary, cross-cultural field of study. And that kind of, when you have international, 5 syllables, interdisciplinary, 7 syllables, it makes people go, ooh, that sounds smart. And it is, of course. So, as part of our context for thinking through what Pacific Studies is, imagining what Pacific Studies for ourselves and for others, there's some larger context that we have to deal with. Because Pacific Studies is very much a university phenomenon. It's a thing that universities created. But as a field of study and a field of knowledge, it has to deal with other forms of knowledge. And so this Olelo No'eau from Hawaii is a good reminder for us. It's something we think about all the time in Pacific Studies at Victoria University. And you're probably familiar with this Olelo No'eau. Ohe pau ka ike I ka halau ho'okahi. All knowledge is not taught in one school, and you can learn from many sources. So for us, Pacific Studies is something that is anchored at the university. It's something that the university created. But in Pacific Studies, you have to acknowledge that there are other areas of knowledge. And the university doesn't have a monopoly on all forms of knowledge, yeah? Because there are so many schools, there's so many places of learning out there in the world, and especially in our indigenous Pacific cultures. One of our current students at 400 level, in the New Zealand system, 400 level is graduate school already. We have a 3-year degree. So this student's in the 400 level, and she came through our undergraduate program. And one of the things the students at 400 level realize is that even though they've come through our undergrad and they grow in confidence and feel like, yeah, I know what Pacific Studies is now. I have an answer for those people who go, what is that? They find that when they get to 400 level, they start to deepen their understanding. So it's not like once you go higher, there's less and less for you to know. What ends up happening, our students have found, is the higher they go in education, the deeper their learning has to go. Yeah? So it's not like a progression where, oh, now I know everything. It's like the more you learn, the less you realize you know, and the more you want to keep learning. Yeah? So this student came up with this description of Pacific Studies that kind of really hit all of us when she shared it in class. And what she said was, in Pacific Studies, we come to learn that all knowledge is equal. All knowledge is equal. That doesn't mean that there aren't bad things and there aren't good things, but all knowledge is equal. And in Pacific Studies, we respect different kinds of knowledge. And that's kind of profound because not everybody respects us. Yeah? We respect every form of knowledge that walks into our space, but that isn't always reciprocated or returned. So, just to keep those ideas in mind, all knowledge is not taught in one school. In Pacific Studies, all knowledge is equal. I want to ground this in my own experience. So, I have a PhD. It took me a long time to finish my PhD. I had a child along the way, I had jobs, I had an extended family to fulfill responsibilities to. But when I got the PhD, people expected that was that. The PhD is called a terminal degree, meaning that's the end. After the PhD, there's no place higher you can go. Yeah? But I want to share a little bit about my learning, because my approach to learning is crucial to the way I promote learning in Pacific Studies at Vic. And I've been influenced by key people throughout the world, but especially here in Hawaii. I did my master's in history at the University of Hawaii. And one of the courses I took while I was at UH Manoa was the first ever decolonizing seminar offered by Professor Haunani K. Trask. And I know, Professor Trask is, a polarizing figure, and, not everybody agrees with her. But in one of her essays called From a Native Daughter, her essay From a Native Daughter, not the book From a Native Daughter. In her essay From a Native Daughter, Professor Trask talks about how she went all the way to Madison, Wisconsin to get her PhD in political science. And that was considered, for a Hawaiian to go to the mainland and get a PhD, that was considered the highest you could go. But in this essay From a Native Daughter, she describes how it wasn't until she came back to Hawaii, came back to the Aina, and put her hands in a lo'i, put her hands in a taro swamp, that she felt her journey of education was starting to be completed. I don't know how to plant taro. I've never put my hands in a lo'i pit, or in Kiribati, a babai pit, or in Fiji, a teitei. So I haven't got my hands dirty in that way. But after I completed my PhD, that for me was not the end of my learning. And I can tell you that one of my proudest moments was when I finished completing this mat called te'inai. Yeah? It's a green coconut leaf mat, common in lots of different Pacific islands. But during my journey as a PhD student, I'd go back to my village on Rambi in Fiji, which is where my family lives. And I'd ask, because my grandmother was a weaver, but she passed away when I was 10, I'd ask and ask my relatives, teach me how to weave. And they would laugh and laugh and laugh. They thought it was the funniest thing that this girl who was getting so much education overseas, Isinaniku, wanted to come home and learn how to weave. And they never taught me, they just laughed at me. And so on this trip back in, what year is that? 2008, so it's quite recent. 2008, I go back and I'm like, you know what, you people never teach me. I'm just going to go and get the leaves myself. Of course, I couldn't climb up the tree to get the leaves, so I asked the cousin to get the leaves for me. He dragged all these fronds over to our house, and I sat down and struggled. And then one of my cousins, this cousin here, Teresia, she looked out from her house and she goes, oh, poor thing, what's she doing? She's really struggling. They didn't think I was serious, so she finally came over and she said, look, I didn't realize you really wanted to learn. Let me show you. So she wove the first half of the mat, and then I wove the second. And we completed it, and I have never been prouder of anything. More proud of that than my PhD, okay? So, now I just have to keep, and I live in New Zealand, so I don't have the coconut leaves, but you have to keep practicing with weaving. The next thing I want to share with you is that in 2012, just last year, I was able to graduate again. And I graduated with a postgraduate certificate in higher education, learning, and teaching. And I undertook this qualification, hardest thing I've ever done because I was working at the same time. But it's a qualification that focuses on learning and teaching in universities and at tertiary level. But what was the privilege for me was that I got to graduate alongside my students. So it's one thing to watch your students graduating and almost feel like, oh, they're my kids, you know. But when I graduated alongside them, for me that was really important because it showed me and them that our journeys have to continue. Our journeys of learning must continue. So I put this photo up of me and one of the students who graduated at that ceremony, Arden Perro. And Arden had come to us. He was a high school dropout who hit rock bottom and picked himself up and became a professional rugby player. And out of his sense of achievement from professional rugby, and his franchise sponsored him to go to university. And we'd got lots of rugby players coming through our classes in Pacific Studies, and none of them completed their degrees. Some of them quite famous All Blacks. And when Arden came through our door, I said to Arden, we've had professional rugby players come through before. Please don't be like them. Please finish your degree. And he says that woke him up because he didn't want to be like the All Black who didn't finish his degree. And he finished his first degree, and he went on to do his second degree. And after his second degree, which is this graduation here, he was selected to be the valedictorian at our graduation. I'm learning from Arden at the moment because now Arden is a lecturer at Welltech, a kind of community college in Wellington, where he's teaching second chance learners. And he says that what he learned from rugby was that if he could achieve in rugby, if he could set himself self goals, he could do that in education. And it was just learning these skills and learning how to apply them. And one of the things he also says, it's learning the language of the university. Yeah? So he talks about self-efficacy in education, and we have great conversations now. But lifelong learning and the journey in Pacific Studies, if you live in the Pacific, if you're from the Pacific, if you love the Pacific, no matter where you are, it will be a journey of lifelong learning. My educational philosophy comes from the tension between these two concepts. The concept of tabula rasa, which comes from the Latin meaning blank slate. And that's a philosophy that when people come into a classroom, they're blank, and the teacher gets to write on them. Yeah? So knowledge is put on you. When you come into the classroom, if you're a blank slate, you acquire knowledge. That's one approach to education. The second approach to education comes from the Greek rather than the Latin. And the Greek roots of the word educate are educare. And educare shares kind of meaning with words like educe. Yeah? So to educe something is to bring it out from within. And so when you're thinking about education in an educare way, you don't see the student coming in as a blank slate. You see them as having things inside of them that you want to educe, that you want to bring out. Yeah? And Pacific Studies is a field that kind of demands a little bit of both these approaches. Yeah? Because, and I get students all the time, especially American exchange students, who come and go, I know nothing, I'm a blank slate. Yeah? So fill me up with knowledge about the Pacific. And we go, hang on a minute, you're not blank. There's stuff in there, yeah, that maybe we need to bring out. Pacific students come in there, they're like, yep, I'm educare me, yeah, because I'm not a blank slate, I'm Pacific, so I know stuff. But then we go, but do you know about this part of the Pacific? You're Samoan, do you know anything about West Papua? And they go, oh, maybe I am a blank slate on West Papua, yeah? So there's a tension, constant tension between this approach in education of tabula rasa and educare. Pacific Studies at Victoria University, I'll try to run through this quickly. I have colleagues, Dr. April Henderson and Dr. Sailau Suali'i Sauni. There are 2.5 of us in Pacific Studies at Vic. April and I are 2, and Sailau is 0.5 because she's 0.5 with Samoan Studies. And our other colleagues in Samoan Studies are Ngalu Malimana Alfred Hankin and Sadat Petelo Moayava. And we together, Pacific Studies and Samoan Studies, we reside, we rest in a building. This is our address, 6 Kelvin Parade. Come visit us if you're ever in Wellington. We reside in a unit called Va'aumanu Pacifica. And Va'aumanu is a Samoan word that means canoe of good fortune or blessed canoe. So we see ourselves in Va'aumanu Pacifica as a double-hulled ocean-going canoe with Samoan Studies as one hull and Pacific Studies as the other. We don't have a canoe like Hawaiian Studies or the Jonathan Napela Center with Yosepa, but we have a metaphorical canoe. And it takes us places. I mentioned that Pacific Studies has a relatively short history at Victoria University. But before it was established, it was dreamed of. people dreamed of Pacific Studies at Victoria University. And in our archives, it's noted that the first time Pacific Studies was raised as a possibility was in the 1920s. And since then, we've had an amazing range of students come through our program, from J.C. Beaglehole, the World Authority on James Cook, to J.W. Davidson, the first professor of Pacific history at the Australian National University, to Ron Crocombe, Albert Wendt, and Terence Wesley Smith. They've all been students at our university who then went on to make the field of Pacific Studies. So we're really proud of our whakapapa, our genealogy of Pacific Studies at Vic. And the most powerful thing for me when I'm telling my students about Pacific Studies is saying, these guys were students here. They were students like you here at Victoria University. So we were established in 2000. In 2005, we created a BA Honours, Masters, and PhD program. In 2012, I wanted to share in 2000, when I first entered the program, we had a 1/3 attrition rate. So 33% of our students would drop out in Pacific Studies courses. But by this year, we had increased that to we'd increased our retention from 66% to 78% for Pacifica students. Overall, we retain 82% of students. The university completion rate for Pacifica students is 53%. So just over half of students are staying at university. So our stats look really good. In this year, in the course that I'm going to talk to you about, PASI 101 had 71 students. At our 200 level, we had 25, 300 we had 12, 11 in our 400 level course, and we have 6 PhDs. Two of the 11 students in 401 are going on to masters next year. So, learning objectives of PASI 101. Remember, I took that course on higher education, learning and teaching, and I got the certificate. One of the things I learned in this course was that learning objectives need to be manageable, achievable, and clear. And so when I first started teaching the course, I had like 10 learning objectives. Now I have 3. 3 clear, achievable learning objectives. I won't go through all of them, but one of the things that has been really useful to the students in terms of learning objectives is my making very clear what key concepts they need to know. When I first started teaching the course, they had to learn like 60 key concepts, and they were like, Now I've narrowed it down to 7, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But what's amazing is how now they become so fluent in these key concepts, and they walk into other classes on the campus and they bang out those key concepts, and their lecturers are like, oh, that's really insightful, the way you use the concept of structure and agency. So now students are going around, they're like, that's structure, that's agency, that's indigenous knowledge, and this is a problem with translation. So it's good. It's empowering in the way it should be. PASI 101. We've, kind of changed the culture of the course a bit as a result of my taking the higher education learning and teaching course. When students first came back in 2000, when I started teaching this course, students were like, why do you assign readings? It's Pacific Studies. What is there to read? Why do we need to read? Today, when new students come in, all the old students who've taken Pacific Studies say, man, you better be prepared to read in this class. You better have done your reading. And they start to enjoy reading, love reading, and they want to talk about reading. The key concept and question papers are a significant part of our assessment. But I wanted to talk to you today about akamai. But this just gives you a sense of all the things we do in the course. So the akamai assessment has different components. They have to do a proposal, they have to do a reflective journal or online blog. They have to do the final product, and as part of doing the final product, they have to attend 2 mandatory workshops and a tech rehearsal. Akamai comes from the Hawaiian, and I'm very grateful to my Hawaiian brothers and sisters for the way that their culture and language has been able to shape Pacific Studies at Victoria University. So in one sense, akamai can be glossed as smart, clever, expert, smartness, skill, and wit. And as I'll show presently, that's just the surface of what akamai means. And I'm learning that as we go. Students are able to do visual art, performing art, a range of things for this assessment. This one from this year was by a New Zealand student, a Pākehā student, who had worked in Fiji as a teacher the year before she came to university. And one of the themes we explore in our course is education. And so she created these 2 paintings, this diptych of paintings, to reflect on the differences between formal education and informal education. In the formal education, you have the teacher separated from the student. You have the blank slate on the board. In an informal educational context, you have some peer-to-peer learning. You have siblings educating younger siblings. These are some of the themes we talk about in the class. And as Professor Kaili said, I draw on the work of Albert Wendt to inform my approach to akamai. Why is it important for students to have an option? There's the option of doing an essay, and there's an option of doing akamai. And the reason we have this option is because Albert Wendt reminded us back in 1976, and it still bears reminding people today, that the Pacific Studies, with all its diversity, 1,200 languages, 25 nations, incredible biodiversity, you can't just learn about it as if just the facts were important. You have to use your imagination to more deeply come to appreciate all the richness that resides in our region. We're also inspired by Epeli Hau'ofa's oceanic vision and the inclusiveness of Epeli's vision, that allows for not just indigenous people, but visitors and migrants to participate in the imagination in a way that reciprocates Oceania's generosity. So our Palangi students come into the course and have an opportunity to learn as well. Here's an image of an American exchange student who came in gangly, awkward, but learned from the Polynesian boys how to do Samoan siva sasa, how to do Tongan dancing, and came away transformed. The painting on the left is also by a Palangi student. And for me, what I enjoy is seeing just the different visions that people bring. This student did a painting of a scene outside a Samoan fale, but her style, her unique form of representation was part of what was educare here. She brought that out of herself, and she was learning new things about Samoa. Another student, this is a second chance learner, Peru Kimiora, mother of 3 kids, in her 40s, came back to university for Akamai. She chose to do a tivaivai, which is part of her Cook Island heritage. The tivaivai, when she was growing up, her mother made tivaivai, but she was never interested in what her mother was doing until she was in her 40s and she had her own children and her mother had passed away, and she came to Pacific Studies and she goes, my heritage, I ignored my heritage when I was young. So she had to teach herself to make a tivaivai now that her mother was gone, and was able to reunite with a tivaivai of her mother's that is held at the Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongarewa, as part of her research. She's lost her mother, but her mother's left tivaivai for her to learn from, and so she did. And the course helped her do that. This is a student, Anona Miller from the US, who was our first jeweler ever. In the 13 years that Akamai has taken place, she decided to do jewelry. She studied different forms of jewelry from Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and then she made her own contemporary versions. And again, it's that using your imagination. You don't have to copy the thing exactly, but you're understanding its form, you're understanding its function. This one was really interesting because the wasese, which is a Fijian whale tooth adornment, that's men's adornment. And she reflected on how in modern society, women are more likely to be adorned. So Pacific heritage has changed, right? Where in the past, men had more elaborate jewelry. Today, you'd be surprised if in a modern context, a man wore that. You'd expect it if he was maybe at PCC. So different forms. I wanted to share with you this, this clip of our students. For the first time, we had poetry, a collaborative poem in Akamai this year. And I think this really gives you it kind of pulls together how the students bring their educare and tabula rasa learning together. So I'm just gonna play this. Hopefully it works.
Before and after. Before Samoa, listen to my father's stories from the islands. Before Samoa, a void in my life that I never knew existed. Before Samoa, no appreciation for the Samoan culture, my culture. Before Samoa, I like yellow bananas. Before Samoa, it's all about me as an individual. Before Samoa, I like Palangi girls. Before Samoa, I can understand Fa'a Samoa, but I can't speak it. Before Samoa, I was a light brown color. Before Samoa, I never really cared that much. After Samoa, understood my father's stories from the islands. After Samoa, I appreciate the Samoan culture, my culture. After Samoa, I want to learn the language, my language. After Samoa, I like green bananas. After Samoa, family comes first. After Samoa, I like island girls. After Samoa, I am a dark brown color. After Samoa, an indescribable sense of connection and belonging to a place that I've never been before. After Samoa, he lelele tō ai mahau I le vale.
Migration, defined as the movement of persons from one country to another. Migration, voyages on big iron wings instead of a humble waka. From family plantations which fed us for generations, to working on factory floors owned by Balangi. The indigenous knowledge of our ancestors, using the stars, skies and the sea as a compass to populate unfamiliar lands, swapped for the need to get a bachelor's degree. Lured by the phrase, the land of milk and honey, they were forced to work long, repetitive hours and ice-cold winters. Migration, the importance of their sacrifices, our humble beginnings, lest we forget.
I was born Fijian Indian, born Fijian and Indian, but never knowing or feeling a connection to Fiji or a connection to India. Instead, feeling a connection to my friends, my Palangi friends, and at the same time, never feeling like I was one of them. Always feeling like I had to justify myself, saying things like, "No, it's okay, I'm half Fijian." Saying it, but never feeling it. I'm an edge walker. I walk on the edge of cultures, always feeling like I'm on the outside looking into windows of cultures that should be, but just aren't a part of me. I am someone who feels my ethnic background doesn't define me, because I define me. So take me as I am, because this is how I am, and I am me.
New Zealand born. New Zealand born Pacific Islanders with parents and grandparents who are people of the sea that migrated here for you and for me. You see, my Pacific people, great sacrifices were made by those who came before us for those who come after us. Not for you to gangbang or hang with drug addicts or alcoholics, but for you to amount to something, so it won't all be for nothing. Now, my Pacific people, we live in a world confined by colour lines being discriminated on, by not only the white man, but by our own Pacific people. You see, I have been called many names under the sun, plastic being one, and it hurts me inside because who says I don't try? Try to learn my language, trying to learn my culture, trying to learn the ways of Fa'asamoa. And yet I'm still being judged on the way that I speak, being put down and saying, your language is weak. But who are you to pass judgment upon me? Who are you to say who I'm supposed to be? Who are you to dictate where I belong? Well, I'm telling you now, you're wrong. I am not Fiapalangi, I am not ashamed, and I will not be a part of your silly mind games. Because I know who I am, and I know where I'm from. I'm a proud New Zealand born, Samoan Tukalam.
Before and after.
Migration,
I am
New Zealand born.
I realize some of you have to go to class, so I wanted to end with the students' voices. With Akamai, we have had an enormous success rate. The students who failed PASI 101 have usually failed because they haven't completed their written work, but the average grade this year, out of 71 students, we had 37 students who achieved above a B+ average. And 27 of those were students in Akamai. So Akamai, sorry, just the last point. What I'm starting to learn, thanks to Pacific and Hawaiian scholars like Manulani Maya, if we stayed at this idea that Akamai just means smart or clever, we would lose out on the depth of understanding that the Hawaiian language, that indigenous knowledge brings. And scholar Manulani Maya encouraged me to push my thinking and understanding of Akamai. I will never have a complete understanding because I'm not fluent in Hawaiian. But to go further with the research skills I do have, to go further into Pukui and Albert and learn that aka mai comes from two words, and the word aka alone has so much richness to offer us. Aka is shadow, reflection, image, likeness, embryo at the moment of conception. Pacific studies can be like this. It can take us to these moments of conception, moments of finding our image, our likeness, but growing into things that we can only imagine. So thank you, mahalo for your patience. Kampasin rapa, vinakavale vusara.